Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So, as I'm sure many of you have seen, the prices of video games are going up a lot lately. And one genre that's really feeling that effect of, people being home and having more time than ever to buy these games that they're nostalgic for, and if you have the time, you might as well play them, well, that's RPGs. But as we all know, RPGs can sometimes be pretty pricey. So that's why I figured I'd make this video to help some of you that maybe have some extra time on your hands and you want to play an RPG on the PlayStation 2, but maybe you don't want to break the bank. Well, I've picked out a big stack of games from my collection. These are all games that I've played. There's going to be no filler in here of games I'm just throwing in there to pad out the video. All these games I have some kind of personal experience with, whether or not I've beat them or played a decent amount to give you a little bit of an impression. Also, I'm going to be front-ending this video with underloved and underappreciated RPGs. And I mean RPGs that really have been shunned or pushed aside by people that have avoided them due to bad reviews, or, are afraid to recommend them because they're afraid that they're going to be criticized, because some of these games are not, most people don't consider them to be the best RPGs, but I think there's a little bit of light and some good qualities in each of them, and I hope that maybe you'll give them a try. So let's start with the first game, which is The Nightmare of Druaga let me make sure I get this right, Fushigi Dungeon. And I actually just played this recently after having it sit in my collection on a shelf for, I don't know, years. I couldn't even tell you where I got this from. And it's not what you're expecting out of an RPG, okay? This is a mystery dungeon roguelike game. So what that means is, if you've ever played a game like Shiren the Wanderer, or the Chocobo's Dungeon games, or Izuna on the DS, it's going to be a game similar to that. And boy, is this a hard game, but also it's worth taking a look at if you're a fan of roguelikes or mystery dungeon games, or even if you're looking to dip your toes into the genre of roguelikes and mystery dungeon, which is sort of a little bit of an offshoot on the series, or the subgenre. There's a lot of subgenres within roguelikes, okay? But it's a good starting point. It is a challenging game, though. It's going to require a lot of patience. Death in this game can cause you to lose substantial amount of time. If the idea of trekking through a dungeon and losing an hour or two of progress and having to start all over doesn't sound that appealing to you, then you might want to stay clear. Something also to note about this compared to other roguelikes from this genre is that the dungeons are not randomly generated. I was very surprised by this, actually. You know how most roguelikes, dungeon crawlers, the dungeons are completely random, the items are random, enemies are random. While there is some randomization in terms of things that you'll be getting from chests and drops from enemies, the dungeon layouts are the same every time, which is really interesting. And the upside to this is that the dungeons will feel sort of unique and handcrafted, which is a bit different than typical roguelikes, because, if it's completely random, it feels kind of chaotic, whereas this has a little bit of a personal touch to it. Really nice music as well. Check it out. This is an RPG that pretty much nobody ever mentions, so if you've never seen this one before, make sure you look into The Nightmare of Druaga. Okay, next up, and remember, I warned you guys, there's going to be some recommendations in here that you typically won't see on most of these kind of videos, and I am going to recommend, probably for the first time ever on YouTube, this is a historic moment right here, I am going to recommend The Legend of Alon on the PlayStation 2. Also, I forgot to mention prices. Nightmare of Daraga, it's about a $13 game. You can get it for $13. Legend of Alon, you can get this game for as cheap as $8, maybe even cheaper if you're patient. So this is an early PlayStation 2 RPG that was absolutely ridiculed when it came out for slow pacing, slow combat, maybe not the most captivating story. But I'm here to recommend this to you. I played this for the first time about a year and a half ago, and I played it on stream, and I was really impressed. Now, like a lot of people, I've played this in the past when I first picked it up, and I found it too hard. I gave up really early on in the game. The enemies were killing me almost instantly in the first area outside of the starting village, and I'm like, I must be missing something, because this combat is really dreary, really slow, and I'm getting one-shotted by these enemies. That's when I got to give a shout-out to someone from my community named Lancet Jade. Lancet is actually the guide writer on GameFAQs, a huge comprehensive guide on GameFAQs for this game. He's pretty much the encyclopedia for information on everything you can imagine for Alon. He has invested hundreds of hours into this game. And I reached out to him, and he told me that, well, the number one tip I can give you early on is make sure, and this is for all of you that have played this game and maybe want to revisit it or will pick this up and try it out, right after the first village there's a little shop out in the woods. Make sure at that shop you buy a sword, a broadsword, a normal sword, and a two-handed axe. The sword will pretty much carry you through the entire game because that's the best weapon for our main character here. But also make sure you buy the two-handed axe, because early on in the game, the two-handed axe, if you're also skilling up your damage and your strength, will pretty much one-shot all enemies in the beginning areas, which makes the game completely different. It blows it wide open and suddenly makes the game playable. And after I finally got over that hump, which most people give up on, they never usually make it past the first couple hours in this game, it became really enjoyable. The story started picking up. The voice acting is fantastic in this game. All the different alien type worlds that you visit in the settings in this game are wonderful and actually quite fun to explore. And eventually I got to the point in the game that, you know, most people think is just a myth because, you know, most people don't make it far enough. There's transformations in this game. One of the things you do with the main character is you transform into these giant hulking monsters, and you gain all these new abilities, and, you know, having control over your party and swapping back between characters. It's quite strategic, and I actually recommend this game now. Looking back on it, this game got poor reviews because, don't forget, that's also for the full retail price of when this game came out, so the reviews have to kind of factor that in. But if you can get this game in a lot for a couple dollars, or heck, even $8, $10 by itself, absolutely give it a try. And if you take my advice and make sure that you get the correct weapons, and also make sure that you're finding these little glowing points around the maps, you find enough of those and you get a bunch of money as well, which helps you, you know, make sure that you're well stocked. I think you can have a lot of fun with The Legend of Daraga. This is a sleeper. You should give it a look. Alrighty. Next one, this is going to be another hot take, let me tell you. I don't want to scare all of you. I mean, not that I have a giant blanket of Bubsy 3D hanging in the background here. You know, not that didn't scare many people away, but if I'm going to scare somebody away, it's probably going to be with this next one. And I'm absolutely going to recommend, I don't care what people say, I am going to recommend Ephemeral Fantasia. Now, let me explain myself here a little bit. Back when I played this game, I was really, really, well, desperate, I guess you can say, for PlayStation 2 RPGs. It was still relatively when the console was new, and this has the distinction in North America as being the very first turn-based RPG, I believe in Japan as well. The very first turn-based, fully turn-based, like traditional combat RPG ever released on the PlayStation 2, which is kind of a nice distinction to have. Now, the thing about Ephemeral Fantasia that most people get stuck on is the fact that, yes, this game is confusing. It has a day-night system which runs on a loop on a week basis, so like after a week passes, the game loops back and you start all over again, and that's sort of the gimmick behind this game, is that every 7 days the game world sort of resets, and it's up to you to accomplish as many goals as you can and meet certain characters and let them know about this sort of time capsule on this island that you're on so that you can stop the time cycle because, well, you know, the evil prince wants to live this wonderful, perfect life with the princess forever. He never wants their wedding to end. He always wants that to repeat every week. And, you know, you got to stop that. People are pretty much living in this cage on this island. And as Mouse, our main character here, you get sort of stuck up in that as well as the musician. And, you know, you're just there to perform for the wedding. And you got to try and break that curse. Anyway, the story is actually quite interesting. It does get much better as the game goes on. And yes, this game is confusing. It's very hard to make progress because it's the kind of game that doesn't tell you where to go, how to do it, when to do it. You can miss crucial things in this game. You can miss entire party members because you weren't at this shop on the other side of town at this exact moment, at this exact time before they left. But to this game's credit, I think it's unfairly judged for the fact that this game is ahead of its time. Like, the world in this game, especially the starting city, is gigantic. The world is really impressive. It's huge. It feels lived in. The NPCs are all over the place, exploring, going about their daily lives. There's tons of shops, tons of things to explore. You will get overwhelmed, and I think in a good way. Like, the overwhelming sense of the starting town in this game is unlike any other console RPG I have ever played. Now, here's the caveat. I do not recommend that you play this game blind. I also did not. I actually did the speedrun for this game. Yes, I am the only person to ever beat Ephemeral Fantasia. Not out. You know, there's one other person in Japan that I based my notes off of, Sonoba, who also beat this game in under 6 hours. I beat this game in about 8.5 hours. It feels like a great accomplishment to be the only person ever. Well, one of only 2 people ever to beat this game in such little time using the speedrun, and the speedrun makes this game a lot of fun. But what that also means is that I cheated, and I knew where to go, where to do this, where to do that, which means that if you go to play this, I do recommend that you use a GameFAQs guide. Try and play it. Very few people can get through this game without a guide and go into it blind, but they usually have a miserable experience. If you don't want to have a miserable experience, please do not feel bad about referencing a GameFAQs guide. Don't feel bad about looking up where you should go and where to do it and how to get this party member. It'll make your experience playing Ephemeral Fantasia that much better, and I highly recommend that you use the guide. If you don't, you're probably going to hate it. Also, music in this game, fantastic. One of the more underrated soundtracks for an RPG, I believe. I'm a big fan of it personally. I know there's some people out there that don't like the music. Ephemeral Fantasia also starting to go up in price just a little bit. Used to be able to get this game for like $10. It's currently sitting at around $17 for a complete copy, so you might want to get it before people actually start discovering that Ephemeral Fantasia is actually worth playing. Alrighty. Now, if I didn't scare you away there, I'm going to scare you away with this next one. But, once again, there's a little reason that I'm recommending Unlimited SaGa. Now, Unlimited SaGa has a really bad rap. This is, to most people, many people, the worst game in the Saga series, and to many people, it's one of the worst RPGs ever created. Now, here's the thing. When I first played Unlimited SaGa, I loved the music, absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. Artwork, absolutely beautiful, loved it to death. That hand-drawn art style, kind of unparalleled from many other RPGs at the time. Now, when I first played this, I couldn't really quite get into it. It was very confusing. The game doesn't tell you a lot, and it's very true. This game, the tutorial in the game, and also in the manual, pretty much tell you almost nothing about what you need to know to play this game. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description, and it's going to link you to a video series on YouTube from, I believe his name is Biggie's Video Guide for Unlimited SaGa. A couple years ago, I watched this guide. Now, it's a playlist. It takes about an hour and a half to watch, and I know that's a lot of time to say, go watch this playlist before you play this game, but let me tell you, even though I have not played Unlimited SaGa since I have watched that video guide, I have a completely newfound appreciation for this game. Because that video guide is so thorough and in-depth and informative, I learned so much new stuff about the mechanics of Unlimited SaGa, how you should play it when it comes to stats, how equipment works, how world exploration works. It pretty much is the definitive guide to playing Unlimited SaGa. So, if you've ever had a burning interest in checking out this game and why it's such a polarizing experience for many people, some people actually call this their favorite RPG of all time, and that's sort of what originally inspired me to look more deeply into it, because I'm like, there must be something I'm missing. And after I spent the time and watched the guide, I'm like, wow, now I completely understand. So, if you want to try Unlimited SaGa, watch the video guide. I will have a link to the description in below. I always recommend this guide if you have any thoughts of playing this game, and maybe you will give it a look. Alright, next, this is probably the least RPG of all the RPGs here that I have in the recommendations, and that is Orphen, Scion of Sorcery. Now, this is a light RPG. It does have RPG elements. You do get randomly, you get abilities as you level up in this game. There are stats. There is an HP, but it's more like an HP bar rather than like actual flat like stats. I would argue it is an RPG. The combat is action turn-based, so it's one of the more unique battle systems. This is also a launch game for the PlayStation 2, which, by the way, you can get this game for about $8. It's really cheap, really easy to get. Very common game. Now, what sets this one apart is, well, first of all, the game is very story-heavy. The game is comprised of about 4 hours, I think, of cutscenes, and almost all of them are unskippable. Only the cool animated ones are skippable, but you don't want to skip those because they're quite nice to watch. The story is very heavy in this game, but it actually is amazing. The story in this game is so good. Now, I played this game when I first kind of got my PlayStation 2, and I didn't beat it. I got maybe like, I don't know, 25-30% through the game. But I revisited this last year, and I did beat it, and holy moly, the story in this game goes places that you would never believe. Crazy twists. It gets pretty dark. Yeah, there's a couple of weird moments in there, if you know what I'm talking about, if you've ever played this game before. Like, really weird. But it has a really crazy story when it comes to sort of this, well, I don't want to spoil it for you, actually. Play Orphen and give it a chance. You know, if you can give yourself a chance to get into the story. The combat is also really fun. The combat, you've never quite played a game like this for RPGs, where you're standing in place. You don't have free reign to move around, but you do control, like, do you use a ranged attack, do you use a spell, do you use a melee attack, and how much force you use with that attack. It's a really unique combat system, and the music is also quite nice. Orphen doesn't get enough love. I really believe that. And if you're looking for something really cheap and something different that you can beat in a weekend, because the game only will take you about 8 to 12 hours to beat, highly recommend Orphen. I have a newfound appreciation for that game. Alrighty, let's get into some games that are not quite as, love or hate, polarizing for people. So let's get into one of my absolute favorite games on the PlayStation 2, and that is Okage Shadow King. This is the perfect RPG to pick up if you're on a budget. This one goes for about $15. Keep in mind this is also on the PlayStation Network. You can download this game in a nice, glorious HD version on your PlayStation 4s, which I do recommend. Now, I always like to say that this game was sort of like Tim Burton sort of meets turn-based RPG, because the character art in this is very whimsical, very just very Tim Burton inspired. You know, if there was a Coraline RPG or something like that, or even almost like a Nightmare Before Christmas kind of setting. There's a lot of that kind of vibe going on in this game. And this is a straight up turn-based RPG. No frills in terms of combat. It's, pretty standard attack, defend, spells. The one big thing is that Stan here, your main character Ari, he gets haunted by Stan, and he follows him around for the whole game and sort of becomes his little alter ego that's always following him around. And Stan adds a very nice comedic sort of effect to the game. Not to say the other characters in this game aren't weird, because they are really weird. There's some really weird characters in this game that you recruit to your party. One of the most thrown together, like, strange party compositions next to something like Shadow Hearts from the New World or something. It's sort of not quite that crazy, but it's a pretty crazy party composition. But where this game really excels is in the pacing. This game has a great pace to it. You are always moving from one location to the next. You're never in one town for too long. You're never in a dungeon for too long. And that's a good thing, because the dungeons are probably the weakest part of this game. They are very similar looking. But if you can get over the fact that dungeons are very generic, and combat is, pretty standard, I think you're going to love it. The enemy designs in this game are really creative. Like, some of the most insane looking, like, in, once again, Nightmare Before Christmas, all the scenes in Christmas where the kids are opening the packages and all these monsters are, like, jumping out of the presents, or in the beginning of the game when they're doing, of course, the starting song, and, like, all the monsters around town are kind of, like, doing their thing. Just imagine that kind of creature design in enemy form in this game. That's kind of my best way to describe it. Really weird, strange monsters. But once again, yes, the pacing. You're always in a new town, always in a new location. The game doesn't take too long to beat. You're looking at about a 25 to 40 hour. 40 hours would be stretching, but it's more like a 25 to 35 hour RPG, which is the nice sweet spot for me. I don't want nothing too crazy, nothing too hard. I've also done speedruns of this game. If you go to my speedrun.com profile, you can actually watch me beat this game in like 6 hours or whatever it takes me. I plan on returning to it soon, too. I love the speedrun for this game. Anyway, Okage Shadow King, highly recommend it. Once again, also on the PlayStation Network store, usually on sale quite often. Now, this one's going to be cheating a little bit, because I'm going to show a Wii game, but that's also because it's on the PlayStation 2. I no longer have a PlayStation 2 copy of it, and I do recommend, if you can, to get the Wii version, because the Wii version is the better version. It allows you to play in widescreen, whereas the PS2 version does not. It also supports 480p, whereas this version does not, or where the PS2 version does not. So if you can, play the Wii version. It's actually a little bit cheaper, and that game is for Baroque. Baroque goes for about $25. This one's cheating a little bit, but if you're patient enough, you might be able to get it for $20. The Wii version's about $13, $14, but a little bit more than $20. But if you can get Wii, it's cheaper. So Baroque is one of the earlier console roguelikes that started breaking out around the PS2 and Wii era, where we really didn't have many roguelikes. And going back to the earlier portion of the video, like with Nightmare of Daraga, there were not a lot of console roguelikes at the time, and Baroque was one of my earlier introductions to the genre, and it's a really dark game. If you're a fan of horror, and you're a fan of RPGs, and you're a fan of dungeon crawling, and if you're looking for a roguelike, I highly recommend you check out Baroque. This game has an atmosphere unlike no other out there. The enemy designs, the character designs are completely out of this world. Really dark and twisted stuff in this game. And what makes it really stand out is how the story progresses. So in Baroque, you actually are forced to die if you want to see the story progress. So upon death, it will usually give you a new cutscene, or a new character, or advance the game in some meaningful way. So if you want to see the end of this game, you are forced to die, and you're always ascending or descending. I forget which one it is. I think it's ascending this tower, trying to get to the final floor, where you either save or kill God. And if that sounds pretty dramatic, well, it is, because it's a very dramatic game. The story is very convoluted, hard to understand. I even tried to read the manga to try and better understand what was going on in this game, and boy, that was confusing as heck. And if this name sounds familiar to you, that is because in Japan, the original Saturn version is getting ported to the Switch eShop, but that is a completely different game. This is a remake of that game. The other game is a first-person dungeon crawler. This is a third-person action dungeon crawler. But amazing game, one of my favorite roguelikes ever, one of my favorite atmospheres in an RPG of all time. And the music, oh my goodness, the music is so good, so dark and heavy and metallic. It just sounds like that grungy, dark, ambient metal kind of sound that you want out of a game with this kind of atmosphere. So, Baroque, check it out. Get it while you can, because the PS2 version is definitely going up in price. Alright, so this one is a game that a lot of people joke about. A lot of people say it's like a meme because it's like watching a movie. And I don't disagree with them, because it is like watching a movie at times, and that is Xenosaga, the first Xenosaga. Now, yes, it is true. This game has a ton of cutscenes. I think the first game has something like 6 or 7 hours of cutscenes, most of which are front-ended in the start of the game. You're going to be watching a ton of cutscenes in this game, but I played this again last year. I revisited it. I did not finish it. I made it probably about 75% of the way through. But I have a new appreciation for Xenosaga, because if you actually give it a chance and you try and pay attention to the story and the characters' motivations, especially with Scion, Scion and Cosmos are such interesting characters. I think you're going to really enjoy this game, especially if you've never played it before. The music is fantastic, even though the battle music gets a little repetitive, because it tends to use that same music no matter what the battle is, even with certain like boss instances. Battle music's great, but it does get to be a little tiresome after a while. But the actual gameplay and the strategic element in combat, with trying to strategize your turns as efficiently as possible, especially if you do receive some feedback from people that kind of help you with, you know, certain builds and how to approach combat in this game, whether or not you decide to use the mech suits in this game or not, is up to you, and sometimes that is a make or break during the combat if you decide to be in suit or out of suit. But man, when you give it a chance, the combat really grips you. The story is captivating, especially as you get further into the game. And the game is still relatively cheap. It is going up in price, though. It's sitting at about $20 right now. Xenosaga is starting to go up in price. This used to be a dirt cheap game, but it's starting to go up, which is why I'm recommending it now. Get it while you can. This is the perfect game to play if you've got a lot of time on your hands. And from what I've heard, I have not played 2 or 3. 2 apparently is not the greatest, but 3 is supposed to be amazing. So that's sort of your first step towards what is many people consider to be one of the greatest RPGs on the PlayStation 2. Okay, so next one, I won't have too much to say about Evergrace, because I played this about 2 years ago on stream, and I had always ignored Evergrace. Evergrace was a launch game that I kind of pretty much just ignored for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. And I played it a couple years ago, and I was kind of blown away by the setting of this game. It has an atmosphere that is just so weird and quirky, and I think the music really adds to that too. This game has such a strange soundtrack in a good way, and I think I was really hooked on this when I went to the first couple of dungeons, and how every dungeon felt handcrafted, hand-placed. Everything seemed to have a meaning. Every room seemed to have a purpose of being there. And what I mean by this is a lot of RPGs are kind of lazy in their dungeon design. You know, it's sort of just corridors and, you know, a chest here or there, you know, get the key, open this door. But Evergrace's dungeons had this sort of light puzzle solving charm to it, which I'm not the biggest fan of puzzle solving in RPGs and dungeons, but I liked what this game sort of introduced into that space of the dungeons, making them feel, you know, sort of like a trap, but not to the level of like Golden Sun or something, where the dungeons are pretty much a giant puzzle, or Lufia 2 or something like that, right? But if you're looking for just something a little janky, you know, this game is a bit jank. I'm not going to lie. The combat, the movement is a little stiff, a little janky. But for a really cheap game, this game is going for $8 right now, complete. Check it out. You know, it surprised me. Maybe you'll like it as well. Okay, this one is another one that I revisited on stream a couple years ago, and that is Wild Arms 3. I played the PlayStation 4 version. You can get it on PSN, and the game looks so good. The main reason I'm recommending Wild Arms 3 before any of the other Wild Arms, well, first of all, this one's really cheap. You can get it for $16 complete in the box, or if you get it on PSN, of course, it's cheaper, especially it's on sale. Main reason I recommend 3 is because, man, the graphics really hold up in this. The cell shading, so beautiful. Cell shading of all graphic styles has held up, as one of the best graphic styles, even all these years later. Cell shading will never get old, never get tiresome. It's really beautiful to just look at a cell shaded RPG, turn-based RPG. Nothing crazy in terms of combat. They kind of do this thing with the camera where it's always moving, and the characters are really active and running around. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really mean much because the combat is still just pretty much straight up turn-based. But if you're looking for just a light sort of, I was going to say lighthearted, it's not a exactly lighthearted game, but just the flair of that style of Wild Arms music with the Western music and the Western world. And for me, I'm not really the biggest fan of Western style games in terms of cowboys and horses and stuff like that. But I really liked Wild Arms when I played it, and the dungeons in this are thought-provoking, to say the least. There are puzzles that you'll be solving. Some of it is kind of, push this block here, do this, shoot that. Dungeons are not my favorite aspect of this game. More so the world exploration and the graphics and the music. Game's really cheap. Kind of just wanted to recommend that in case you forgot about it. Now, this is one that everybody knows about, or I imagine everybody knows about by this point, but I just wanted to recommend it one more time because sometimes I feel like the sequel gets sort of pushed in front of the original when I do believe that people should still be checking out the original. And that is Dark Cloud. And if yes, you see here, my copy is signed by Akihiro Hino, the president of Level 5. I met him several years ago for the launch of Yokai Watch when he came to New York. So, man, love to have a signed copy of this game. I was thinking of doing a video on my signed game collection. Maybe we'll get around to that at some point in the future. Anyway, Dark Cloud 1. Now, the reason why I'm recommending Dark Cloud 1 is because a lot of people always recommend Dark Cloud 2 before you play Dark Cloud 1. I'm here to tell you, you should play Dark Cloud 1 first. Most people are like, well, everything about Dark Cloud 2 is better. Quality of life, the graphics are better, the music is, well, arguably the music is better. I'm not on that boat. I like the music in this one way more. It's more fleshed out, there's more features, the game just looks better. Yeah, well, this game has a certain charm to it that is, in my opinion, just not matched by the sequel. The characters in this game are lovable. The music is freaking phenomenal. The music is amazing in this game. Why is Al Forest one of the best songs in an RPG of all time? And I stand by that. Such an amazing song. But Dark Cloud 1, yes, it is more basic. The story is not quite as complex as 2 with the voice acting and whatnot. Yeah, the graphics aren't that beautiful cel-shaded that are in the sequel. And yeah, 2 has a lot of quality of life changes in terms of, combat or dungeoning or added features that, like Speeda, some people hate Speeda, but there's a lot of things in the mech suit in 2. To me, in the photographs, see, this is what I mean, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in 2. Whereas me, I prefer the simplicity of 1. 1 is just dungeon crawling, town building, that's it. And I love that about, and fishing, who can forget fishing, right? I love the simplicity of Dark Cloud 1. I love Toan. I love Xiao. I love all the characters in this game. I like the settings that this game goes to from one town to the next. I like that it's not overly convoluted. I just like dungeon crawling, finding parts for my town and building the town and moving on to the next part. And I've been playing more Dark Cloud than ever on my Twitch channel over the past couple years. I haven't been doing it for a while because it does require quite a bit of time. But I also speedrun Dark Cloud now. I sit down and beat this game in one sitting multiple times. Currently, I'm able to beat the game in just over 8 hours, playing on the PlayStation 4 version. Which, yes, once again, this game is on the PlayStation 4. I highly recommend that you play the PlayStation 4 version. You can get this for about $12 though if you're looking for the original PS2 copy. But yeah, I mean, I play this game more than ever now, and it still holds up. Now, forgive me if you've never heard of Dark Cloud. It's from Level 5, so developers of now Ni no Kuni and White Knight Chronicles and Yokai Watch and games such as that. It is a dungeon crawler, third-person action, which at the time when it came out was heavily compared to the Zelda series. It was, actually really hyped up to be the Zelda killer on PlayStation 2. But this game is nothing like Zelda. It's nothing like Zelda. That was just a marketing ploy to get you to buy the game, and people did buy it because it did become a greatest hits. And I think comparing this to Zelda is far from the truth of what this game is. because the dungeons are randomly generated. It's a roguelike, essentially, or roguelite in that aspect, where the dungeons are random, the item placement is random, the enemies' locations are random, where the key is to get to the next floor is random. And as you go through the dungeons, you find parts, the diorama parts, where you find parts like villagers, homes, pieces to their homes, and you piece a village back together in the overworld. And this game is comprised of like dungeon, town, dungeon, town, dungeon, town. It's how the game goes, and you gradually get more characters to play as and swap between, which is another thing about this game. Way more characters to play as, way more variety in terms of gameplay compared to 2, in my opinion. But that's pretty much what the game is. You just go and then you place your town. You know, do you want this house here? You want this house here? The game kind of shoehorns you into certain compositions based on recommendations of what town members want. But that's pretty much the game. It's simple, really easy to kill time with this. It's the kind of game that you can pick up, play for 30 minutes, or play for 5 hours. You know, it's not a game that demands your entire day. You can pick it up, do a couple floors of the dungeon, leave, save the game, come back to it another time. It's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and I highly recommend that you check it out. And next is Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. Now, this is a bit different from most of the other RPGs that I've included in this video in that it's it's not a turn-based RPG, it's not exactly a roguelike, it's just like an action dungeon crawler, but it is still an RPG, and the reason I recommend this now is because the Baldur's Gate games are going up in price, especially the black labels, Dark Alliance 1 and 2, mostly because, well, first of all, they're amazing games, but also because that sequel is going to be coming out, you know, in the foreseeable future, so get them while you can before the price and the hype goes really high. Right now you can get the black label for around $20-ish, and I recommend the first one because why not start with the first one? The second one's also a little bit more expensive. This is a personal favorite of mine from when I first got my PlayStation 2. It has been quite a while since I've played it, but the one thing I always remember this game for was the water effects in this game at the time. I used to run in the little puddle in the game and just look at the water ripple for like the longest time. Really impressive water tech in this game. But it's really fun. I mean, it's if you're just in for a good hack and slash, you know, not quite Diablo, it's not like point and click your character. You're in full control over your characters and their combat. But if you're a fan of the Norath games as well, like Champions of Norath on the PlayStation 2, and you've never played Dark Alliance, you should check it out. What's there to say about it? It's by the books, pretty standard. Dungeon designs are, they're nice looking for the time. It's been so long I can't really recall the story of this game, but there are some definite fans of the story and certain characters in here. What's his name? Drizzt or something like that. Yeah, you hear about that guy all the time for fans of these Baldur's Gate games. But yeah, check out Dark Alliance before it becomes too expensive, and maybe check out the sequel. And lastly, I wanted to do this one last because it is the most expensive one on here. It's a little bit more than $20, but I still want to recommend it before the price goes up. And that game is Grandia III. You can get this for about $27 right now, but I feel like the price will go up. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of this series. In fact, I still have never even played 1. I know that might surprise you. I played 2 a little bit back in the day, but 3 is really where I got my introduction, my main introduction to the series. And it has one of my favorite combat systems in any RPG. The combat in 3 is so fun because it has aerial juggling, okay? So the combat emphasizes comboing your enemies so that they get knocked up into the air, and then you continue to combo them in the air. And some of the things you can do in combat with that are just so fun. I don't know what it is with air combat in me with RPGs, but man, it is so much fun in this game. Plus, I like the soundtrack. I remember liking the settings. It has been a bit since I've played it, but I remember really liking the environments, like the starting environments, going through the forests and the woods and seeing the lighting and sort of like the lens flare and just the lush rivers and forests. It was a very peaceful, relaxing game. Has it held up? I'm not exactly sure. I haven't really delved into it deeply recently, but it is something that I do want to recommend because I do feel like the price on this is going to go up as the years go on, so get it while you can. And that's going to do it for the video. Now, yes, there were a lot of RPGs that I could have included, but didn't, mostly because, well, either I've barely played them, haven't played them at all, or the prices might be going up on it as well. But when it comes to cheaper RPGs, There's plenty more I could have recommended, but these are just some of the safe recommendations that I had at least a little bit to say about. I also didn't want to include too many. I didn't want it to be overwhelming. But if you enjoyed the video, your guys' support lately is really encouraging me to make more and more videos. Hopefully you've been enjoying the weekly uploads. Always a thumbs up lets me know that, hey, you're liking the weekly uploads, you're liking the content. Hopefully you like the old school vibes coming from these videos. Lots of people get nostalgic right now watching some of my old videos, and I do appreciate that. If you're looking for more RPG content, I can definitely make a video like this for other consoles in the future. So once again, let me know, and thank you very much for watching. And once again, also, I'll have a link to my Twitch down below. If you've never been to my Twitch channel, I've streamed a large majority of these games on my Twitch channel. And any of the RPGs on PlayStation 2 that I'm going to play in the future, I'll be streaming those too. I played some pretty good ones lately that are just a little too expensive to include in this video. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.